So shit's about to get more expensive. The Bank of Canada today decided to increase interest rates by another 0.25 basis points, which essentially brings the overnight lending rate to about 4.75 and the prime rate to about 6.75, which means if you have a mortgage and you're looking to if you have a mortgage and you're looking to refi or you're looking to get a new mortgage, you now have to qualify with the stress test around 8.75% basis points, which is absolutely egregious when you consider something like 5 years ago, you could get into the mortgage market for anywhere between, like, let's say 1 to 2%, right? If you got things correctly. Now, essentially, people are in a scenario where they have to really struggle to either consider paying their mortgage payments or other debt instruments, right? Another thing basically is that there was an Equifax report that came out yesterday that said something like north of 14% of Canadians are actually now at an increased delinquency rate for non-mortgage items, right? So people are able to make their mortgage payments, but now they're missing out on their credit card payments, car payments, and line of credit payments, right? So another 0.25 basis point increase is actually very significant, because essentially what this means for the housing market is either A, if you're looking to refi and you can't basically pay at this new rate, you now need to consider selling, right? Which basically is going to mean that there's going to be an increased supply of real estate coming into the market. And if you consider very standard economics, supply and demand, essentially if there's an increase in supply of housing, there's going to be a drop in house prices itself, right? Which is very problematic right now, because essentially Canadians' houses are essentially the majority of their investments and life savings at this point now, right? Especially if you're a baby boomer, considering the fact that CPP as well as pensions may not actually be able to cover cost of living at this rate of inflation already, right? The other part of this too is that the rate of inflation is actually increasing at a higher rate, and the most significant part about that actually is that it's a bit more exogenous than people think. So 2 days ago, prices of energy started to increase because Saudi Arabia announced that they're actually going to be voluntarily cutting oil production. So again, supply and demand, if OPEC is basically supplying less oil, means the actual price of oil is going to go up, which also puts us in a more precarious scenario. A lot of people right now are very much so aware of all the fires that are happening in Canada, whether it be over on the West Coast, over on the East Coast, right? The problem is now we can't really cut back on hydrocarbon production, because essentially that is what is going to be increasing GDP going forward. So we're in a really precarious scenario right now, right? Where essentially Canadians are at their maximum pain point in terms of being able to pay back their debt instruments, right? But at the same time too, inflation's increasing. You can consider this stagflation. And from a corporate perspective, right, you also have to think about it this way. Producer price index is actually a leading indicator of CPI, right? So if inflation is increasing because energy costs are increasing, it means the PPI, or cost of production for producers, is actually going to increase as well too. Now, with an environment where interest rates are increasing, that means not only does the cost of servicing your debt increases, but also the cost of borrowing new debt increases. So it's highly likely that we actually see a lot of corporations looking at doing cuts, whether that's labor cuts, whether that's operational cuts, whatever it is. It's the most likely thing. And the more precarious part about this is that there's now conversation that in July, that the BOC may consider doing another rate hike, right? So that would actually put further fire in the condition that we are right now. So not the best time to be a Canadian right now, but definitely something to consider when you're making any financial decisions or anything to that extent at this point.